Hey everybody. Today I'm talking about some of the things that come up quite a bit, I would say, as fears about Indianapolis. We're going to look at three of kind of I wouldn't call them crazy misconceptions necessarily, but certainly misconceptions about some of the weather that you're going to find around Indianapolis. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Living in Indianapolis channel. Welcome back. If you have questions about anything regarding Indianapolis, you're thinking of moving to Indianapolis, you want to know what Indianapolis is like, or any of the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis for that matter, then make sure you reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back when it comes time for you to make your move anywhere in the Indianapolis metro. All right, so today, three of the biggest misconceptions about the weather in Indianapolis. The last one, the third one, is probably the one that people fear the most. So we'll get into that here in a second. But number one is kind of representative of today. And if you can hear some of these cars going by, the roads are wet, super cloudy. It's a weathery kind of day. I don't really know if that's a word, honestly. Weathery probably isn't, but you've got 75 degrees and sunny, clear skies. I think that's kind of the standard for really good weather, and any deviation from that, then it's weathery. So you've got some kind of weather, and today it's rain. So people ask, does it rain in Indianapolis? And of course it does. Actually, when you come to Indianapolis, especially spring, summer, fall, people are a little bit surprised about how lush it is, how many trees there are, and especially in parts of the fall, a lot of the spring, and most of the summer, they're surprised as to how green it is with all of the trees, the grass. It's just more lush than what they realized. So of course you have to have some rain for that, and we get rain all of those seasons, but we get rain in the winter too. So how much rain do we get though? We do get a sizable amount of rain, and most people think that the rainiest, or one of the rainiest at least, cities in the entire country is Seattle. And it's kind of true, but if you're talking about total rainfall for the year, Seattle gets roughly 39 inches. It gets a little bit more than that sometimes, a little less than that, but we're talking averages over years and years and years and years of measuring rainfall, so 39 inches or so. Indianapolis gets 44 each year. So 5 full inches on average more than what Seattle gets, which is pretty surprising to some. Now the last couple of years have been a little bit dry, so we've been right at 40 or a little bit under. And then there are of course times where it's actually quite a bit more than that, where it approaches 50 and goes over 50 inches a year. But the thing with Seattle is that a lot of the year you get a little bit of rain each day. So in the morning, maybe it's a little bit rainy. Portland, Oregon's kind of the same way, the whole northwest of the United States. And here, though, we go long dry spells, and then we get a lot of rain. So we can get a thunderstorm, and it could drop an inch of rain on us. We get maybe like today, and the last 4 days have been so incredibly rainy. It's spring right now, so that's not terribly surprising, but we've got, I think, over 5 inches of rain in the last 4 days. So that's an awful lot. Oh, actually, the sun's coming out right now. Amazing. This is helpful. This is the first time we've seen the sun in quite a few days, which is pretty nice. Anyways, we get quite a bit of rain throughout the year. It just comes in bunches. So that's a little bit surprising to people, but it's the reason things are so green and lush a lot of the year here, to the surprise of many. So number 2 would be the snow. And I would say, actually, if you've never been to Indianapolis or Indiana or the Midwest and you're thinking about moving here and you want to know when to visit, it'd be pretty nice to visit all the seasons. See what summer's like, see what winter's like, see what the fall's like. I would say fall is probably the worst time to visit. And the reason I would say that is because the fall is just generally too nice. It doesn't give you a good representation of what a lot of the weather you can experience around Indianapolis. So The winter might be the best time to visit because you want to really see it at its worst. And that's what a lot of people, when I talk to them, they don't know anything about this whole area and they're thinking about moving to it, they can figure out what the positives are, what the good things are. That's pretty easy, but they want to know if they're walking off a cliff. What are the bad things? So let's talk about winter. And winter here is cold. We get temperatures in the single digits sometimes. We get, of course, in the teens and the 20s. Most of the winter, 20s and 30s. We do get some days where it's in the 40s and 50s, and we get stretches where it's in the 40s and 50s, and we can have a freakish day where it might get into the 60s, something like that. But for the most part, December, January, February, and even some of March, we're looking at 20s and 30s for the most part. So cold, I think a lot of people can deal with, but the biggest question is snow. And the misconception is that we get a lot of snow here in Indianapolis, but actually, just looking around me right now, it's a little greener because this is in the spring, so things aren't quite this green in the winter, but this is generally what it looks like in the winter, just bare. The ground is bare, the trees are bare, although right now they're starting to fill in because, again, it's spring. But that's what you really should expect in the winter. We only get roughly 22 inches a year snow. And while that seems like maybe a lot, but if you're from Minnesota or something like that, or even northern Indiana right along the Great Lakes, and Chicago, they get over 60 inches a year or so. That's 3 times as much as we get, which of course is a heck of a lot. And they spend a lot longer periods of time with snow on the ground. Ours just aren't all that much. The time periods that we spend. We can get some snow in November. We don't usually, but we can get snow in November, December, January, February, March, and occasionally when we get into April, the beginning of April can be a little volatile. It can be really nice or it can be a little bit cold. It's just that the cold doesn't really last long, but we've had snow in early April before. So when you think about November, December, January, February, March, April, that's 6 months, which is half the year where it's possible to get snow. So when you spread those 22 inches out over those 6 months, you're really not talking about a lot of snow at any one particular time. We'll get maybe 2 or 3 inches, and that's typically a fairly large snow. If we got 5 or 6 inches, 7, 8, something like that, then it's usually setting records. And that could be around a little longer because a lot of times when a big system comes through with snow, then it's followed by a cold. A cold front's what brings it, and then it's cold air behind it. And so it can stick around for several days or a week, sometimes longer than that. Just depends on how long the cold snap really is. But as soon as the temperature gets back up to that 30s, close to 40, and the sun's out, especially when the sun's out, boy, the melt is on. But even when we get snow, the roads, I don't care who you talk to about the roads being bad during the snow, they are not. They are cleared quite fast. The interstates cleared exceptionally fast. Side roads where you live, that might take longer because those are oftentimes contractors that are hired to come and do your neighborhood, and they may have a long list of people to get to, so it could take them all day to get there, and sometimes they come during the night later after the snow. So that is a side story, but the main roads in the city, the interstates, they're clear really quite fast. So I would say snow is probably one of those things that you should worry about a whole lot less than what you have been worrying about, if you have been at all. Okay, this last one. So this last one is the big one that people ask about, certainly a lot more than I ever would have anticipated getting into real estate years and years ago. As I've come across more people moving here, it's the question that they have on their mind. And right now we're in spring. We're going in spring, summer. It's tornado season. And people ask questions like, you have basements there. Is that the reason you have basements? Absolutely not. That is not the reason Indiana has basements. The whole Midwest, that's not the reason. I mean, of course, if you were in a tornado, it'd be nice to have a basement. Certainly would, but it's not a requirement. And we only build basements because it's cheap square footage to put into a house, and we can. There are places in the country where you just flat out can't build a basement because the ground won't allow it for one reason or another. That's a whole other story. But Indiana actually doesn't rank really all that high on their tornado list. There are a lot of other states that get a lot more tornadoes than Indiana does. Now, of course, Indiana still can have them, that's for sure. And I've got some stats here for you. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about and how far down Indiana really ranks. This can vary, but Indiana averages about 22 tornadoes a year. And most of them happen towards southern Indiana, but they can happen all over. And this is a statistic that actually goes across the entire country too. Most tornadoes are small. They're not these giant F5s that you see in movies like Twister and all these crazy disaster movies. You can absolutely have some large ones without a doubt, but most are quite small and most are rural, meaning they really don't affect very many people or nobody at all. And that is statistically, if I can get that out, true, because most of the country is rural. You have these places where cities are and people are gathered, but you have these giant spaces in between. So Indiana's like that, but 22 on average per year. And so looking at the stats here, Texas, 120, Mississippi, 102, Kansas, 87, Alabama, 83, Louisiana, 63, Illinois, next door to Indiana, is more in Tornado Alley than Indiana is, 61. Iowa, 61, Georgia, 56, Oklahoma, 53, Nebraska, 52, Minnesota, 49, which is surprising to a lot of people. Minnesota has more tornadoes than Indiana does. Colorado, 44, Florida, 43, North Carolina, 42, Arkansas, 41, Tennessee, 37, Kentucky, 36, Wisconsin, 30, North Dakota, 30, and then we start getting into the 20s and closer to where Indiana is. So there are a lot of states, shocking to people, that rank higher for average tornadoes per year than what Indiana does. I wouldn't say you don't worry about them at all, but I don't think you should worry about them nearly as much as you think you might. And if you want to build a storm shelter or a bunker or something like that, there are companies that do that. If you are absolutely dead set on having a home with a basement because of tornadoes, well, lucky for you, and lucky for you in a lot of other places, not just around Indianapolis, there are basements out there that exist, without a doubt. So if you have any questions about any of these weather misconceptions, turning hopefully them into weather truths to clear up some of the questions for you, then make sure you reach out any way that you know how, and we'll catch you in the next one.